Is this blood? Oh my God, I would have listened to her when she was begging.
After their one-night stand, CEO saw the red on bedsheet. What happened next shocked him. Distinguished viewers, welcome to Luxury True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more amazing real-life luxury stories. Now, let's get into the story. James Theodore grew up in wealth but not in warmth. His father, Edward Theodore, was a powerful businessman who believed emotions made people weak. Their mansion was huge and beautiful, yet it often felt empty. The only person who showed James kindness was his mother, Margaret Theodore. She taught him compassion and patience. But when she died after a long illness, the house became colder, and James slowly learned to hide his emotions. As he grew older, James focused only on success. He studied business relentlessly and began helping in his father's company. Edward pushed him hard, expecting perfection at every step. James rarely had friends and avoided relationships, believing attachments only brought pain. By the age of 28, he had taken control of Theodore Holdings and expanded it into a powerful global company. Despite his wealth and fame, James lived a lonely life. His days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and endless responsibilities. The city admired him as a brilliant billionaire CEO, but very few truly knew the man behind the success. Behind his calm and confident image was someone who had built walls around his heart, determined never to feel the pain of loss again. Anita Charles never knew luxury, but she once knew love. She was born into a small but happy family where laughter filled their modest home. Her father, Samuel Charles, was a passionate musician who played the piano in small restaurants, while her mother, Nora Charles, worked as a seamstress known for her kindness. Though they did not have much money, they always made sure Anita felt safe and cherished. Her mother often told her that kindness was more valuable than riches, and before her illness took her life, Nora gave Anita a small silver necklace as a keepsake. Anita held on to it dearly because it was the last memory of her parents. After both her parents passed away within 2 difficult years, Anita was sent to live with her aunt, Vivian Williams. At first Anita believed things would get better, but Vivian quickly showed her true nature. Cold, greedy, and impatient, Vivian saw Anita as nothing more than a burden. The small apartment they lived in always felt tense, and Anita was often forced to do endless chores just to avoid Vivian's anger. Vivian constantly complained about money and reminded Anita that she was only staying there out of pity. Despite the harsh treatment, Anita remained gentle and hopeful. She loved drawing and sometimes spent quiet moments sketching flowers or city streets in an old notebook she kept hidden under her bed. Deep inside, she dreamed of going to school, getting a job, and someday leaving Vivian's house forever. But life had other plans, and the struggles waiting ahead would soon test her courage in ways she never imagined. Anita Charles grew older under the heavy shadow of Vivian Williams' bitterness. The small apartment always smelled of cheap perfume and stale cigarettes, and Vivian's voice often echoed through the thin walls, complaining about bills and misfortune. Anita woke up every morning before sunrise to clean the apartment, wash dishes, and run errands. She rarely complained because she knew any small mistake could trigger Vivian's temper. Still, Anita carried a quiet determination inside her heart. She kept her late mother's silver necklace close to her chest and often whispered promises to herself that one day she would leave this life behind. In her spare moments, she drew in her worn notebook, sketching dreams of peaceful homes and beautiful gardens she hoped to see someday. Across the city, James Theodore's world looked completely different. Inside the tall glass tower of Theodore Holdings, his presence commanded respect and silence. Employees straightened their posture whenever he walked past. Meetings ran with strict precision, and every decision he made shaped the company's growing empire. His closest associate, Daniel Hayes, often tried to encourage him to relax or enjoy life, but James rarely listened. To him, success was not a choice but a duty he carried since childhood. He had everything money could buy, yet his evenings were often quiet and empty in his luxurious penthouse. While the city admired James as a brilliant and unstoppable billionaire, Anita continued to struggle just to survive another day under Vivian's roof. Their lives moved in completely different directions, like two distant roads that would never cross. Neither of them knew that fate was slowly guiding their paths toward a single night that would change both of their lives forever. Vivian Williams had always believed that life owed her something. She often complained about how her younger sister, Nora, had been the kind and loved one in the family, while she had struggled with debts and broken relationships. When Anita came to live with her after her parents died, Vivian never saw her as family. Instead, she saw another mouth to feed and another reason for her own frustrations. Every evening she sat at the small kitchen table counting bills and muttering about money. Anita would quietly clean the apartment while listening to her aunt's bitter words. Sometimes Vivian would stare at Anita with cold eyes, as if calculating how the girl could somehow solve her financial problems. As the months passed, Vivian's greed grew stronger. She began forcing Anita to find small jobs around the neighborhood, cleaning houses, washing cars, or helping in small shops. Whatever Anita earned had to be handed over immediately. If the money was not enough, Vivian's anger filled the apartment like a storm. She would slam doors, shout insults, and remind Anita that she could easily throw her out into the streets. Anita tried her best to please her, but no matter how hard she worked, Vivian always demanded more. One rainy evening, Vivian returned home from a conversation with a suspicious friend, and her attitude changed completely. She watched Anita quietly for a long moment before speaking with a calm but frightening tone. She told Anita that there was a quick way to make money in one night, far more money than Anita could earn in weeks. Anita immediately sensed danger in her aunt's words. Her heart started pounding as Vivian explained that she had only two choices: bring home a large amount of money the next day or leave the house forever. Anita stood frozen, clutching the silver necklace her mother had given her, realizing that her life was about to take a terrifying turn. The rain continued tapping against the apartment windows that night as silence filled the room between Anita and Vivian. Anita stood near the kitchen counter, her hands trembling slightly while clutching the edge of the table. Vivian sat across from her with a cold expression, completely unmoved by the fear on the young girl's face. Slowly, Vivian explained her plan in a calm voice that made Anita's heart race even faster. She told Anita that some girls earned large amounts of money in one night by meeting wealthy men. According to Vivian, it was easy work and the money was immediate. Anita shook her head quickly, her voice trembling as she begged her aunt not to force her into something so frightening. But Vivian's eyes hardened as she leaned forward and placed a small purse on the table. Vivian gave her a clear choice. Either Anita would go to a certain nightlife district where wealthy men often visited and bring back enough money by morning, or she would pack her things and leave the apartment immediately with nowhere to go. There will be no second chances, no sympathy, and no discussion. Anita felt the ground beneath her world suddenly collapse. She had never imagined facing such a decision. She had always protected her dignity and her hopes for a better future, but now those dreams felt fragile and distant. Her mind raced through possibilities, but every path seemed to end in fear and uncertainty. That night Anita barely slept. She sat on her small bed staring at the silver necklace resting in her palm, remembering her mother's gentle voice and the promises she had made to live a good life. Tears quietly slid down her face as she realized how trapped she truly was. If she refused Vivian, she would be homeless with no money and no support. If she agreed, she would step into a world she had always feared. As morning slowly approached, Anita understood that the next day would force her to make the most painful decision of her life. Morning arrived quietly, but Anita felt no peace. The sky outside was grey and heavy, matching the weight pressing against her chest. She dressed slowly in the simplest clothes she owned, her hands trembling as she tied her hair back. Vivian watched her from the kitchen with impatient eyes, reminding her that excuses would not be accepted. Before leaving the apartment, Anita placed her mother's silver necklace around her neck and held it tightly for a moment. It was the only thing she had left from the family she once knew. Taking a deep breath, she stepped outside into the cold air, feeling as if she were walking away from the last pieces of her old life. The city streets grew louder as evening approached. Cars passed quickly, lights from buildings flickered on, and the nightlife district slowly filled with people. Anita walked carefully through unfamiliar streets until she reached the area Vivian had described. Bright neon signs lit the sidewalks while groups of women stood along the street waiting for passing customers. Some of them laughed loudly, while others watched the road with tired expressions. Anita felt completely out of place among them. Her heart pounded rapidly as she stood near the corner, unsure what to do or where to look. Every passing car made her nervous, and every glance from strangers made her feel exposed. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself of Vivian's cruel warning. If she returned home with nothing, she would lose the only roof she had. The thought terrified her even more than the situation she was standing in now. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to appear confident even though panic filled her mind. Around her, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware of the fear growing inside her. At that moment, Anita could not know that somewhere nearby, a powerful man was about to walk into this same street and change the direction of her life forever. That same evening, a black luxury car slowly rolled into the busy nightlife district. Inside sat James Theodore, leaning back in the seat with a tired expression. It had been another long day of meetings, negotiations, and endless paperwork at Theodore Holdings. Although he was respected and admired by many, the pressure of leading such a massive company often left him mentally drained. Sometimes, when the stress became overwhelming, he visited this district to clear his mind for a while. It had become a quiet habit he rarely spoke about. His driver stopped near the usual street, and James stepped out into the cool night air, adjusting his coat as he looked around. The street was alive with noise and bright lights. Several women approached him with confident smiles, trying to attract his attention. James greeted them politely but continued walking, his sharp eyes scanning the street. Over the years he had become used to this environment, but nothing about it truly interested him anymore. Then, as he glanced toward the far corner of the sidewalk, his attention suddenly stopped. Standing slightly apart from the others was a young woman who looked completely different from the rest. She appeared nervous, her posture tense, her eyes uncertain as if she had been pushed into a place she did not belong. James watched her quietly for a moment. Something about her expression felt genuine and unguarded. Unlike the others, she was not trying to impress anyone or call out to passing cars. Instead, she looked like someone fighting a silent battle within herself. Curiosity stirred inside him, and he slowly walked toward her. Anita noticed his approach and felt her heart begin to race again. She lowered her eyes nervously, unsure of what to say. When James finally stood in front of her, he studied her face carefully. In that brief moment, he sensed there was a story behind her fear, a story he could not yet understand. Anita felt her heart beat quicken as James Theodore stood in front of her. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried a quiet confidence that made it obvious he was not like the other men passing through the street. For a brief second, Anita considered running away, but her feet refused to move. The memory of Vivian's warning echoed loudly in her mind. If she returned home without money, she would have nowhere to go. James studied her expression carefully and noticed the tension in her shoulders and the nervous way she held her hands together. Instead of speaking immediately, he gave her a moment, sensing that she was frightened. James finally spoke in a calm voice, asking if she would like to go somewhere quieter to talk. His tone was not aggressive, but Anita still felt overwhelmed. She nodded slightly, unsure what else she could do. James guided her toward a nearby bar that he occasionally visited. The place was quieter than the noisy street outside, filled with soft music and dim lights. They sat at a small table near the corner, and James ordered 2 drinks. Anita hesitated when the glass was placed in front of her. She had never touched alcohol before, and the situation already felt confusing and dangerous. For a moment she thought about refusing, but then Vivian's harsh words returned to her mind. Trying to appear calm, Anita lifted the glass and took a small sip. The taste was unfamiliar, and she quickly placed the drink back on the table. James had already consumed more than she had, and the long stressful day seemed to be catching up with him. His posture relaxed as he continued drinking, and the quiet tension between them slowly changed. Anita remained nervous, watching him carefully while wondering what would happen next. Deep inside, she hoped the night would somehow end quickly so she could return home safely. But as the hours passed and James finished another drink, he eventually stood up and told her they should leave. Without fully realizing how much he had already had to drink, he led her outside and toward his car, setting the stage for a night neither of them would ever forget. The drive to James Theodore's penthouse was quiet. The city lights flashed across the windows as the car moved through the streets, but Anita barely noticed them. Her mind was filled with fear and confusion. She sat still in the seat, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of her coat while the silver necklace rested against her chest. James remained silent during most of the drive. The alcohol had begun to cloud his judgment, making his thoughts slower and his emotions less controlled. By the time the car reached the tall building where he lived, Anita's heart was beating faster than ever. Inside the penthouse, everything looked grand and unfamiliar to her. Large windows showed the glowing city skyline, expensive furniture filled the rooms, and the quiet space felt far away from the small apartment she had known all her life. James loosened his tie and told her to sit while he stepped away briefly. Anita remained standing near the entrance, unsure where to go or what to do. Her instincts told her she should leave, but she remembered the threat waiting for her at home. When James returned from his room, his movements were slower, his voice heavier from the alcohol. He looked at her for a moment before giving her a direct choice. He told her plainly that she could either stay the night with him or leave immediately. There was no anger in his voice, but his words were firm. Anita's chest tightened as panic filled her again. She tried to explain that she was not ready and quietly pleaded with him to let her go. But James, whose judgment was clouded by exhaustion and alcohol, did not fully understand her fear. To him, the situation seemed simple, something he believed she had already agreed to earlier. Anita stood frozen, realizing that leaving without money would mean losing the only place she had to live. After several painful moments of silence, she slowly lowered her head, feeling trapped by circumstances she could no longer escape. The silence in the penthouse felt heavy as Anita stood there, her thoughts racing with fear and uncertainty. The city lights outside the tall windows shimmered across the room, but inside her heart everything felt dark. She had never imagined her life leading to this moment. James, already affected by alcohol and exhaustion, did not notice the depth of her panic. To him, the situation seemed like something that had been understood earlier. Anita's voice trembled as she tried once more to explain that she had never done this before, but her words were soft and filled with hesitation. Minutes passed slowly as Anita struggled with the decision forced upon her. The thought of returning home with nothing frightened her deeply because she knew Vivian would throw her out immediately. She remembered the cold expression on her aunt's face and the cruel words that had pushed her into this situation. Her fingers moved to the silver necklace around her neck, and she held it tightly for comfort. The memory of her parents filled her mind for a brief moment, giving her strength to face what she believed she had no power to avoid. That night became the most painful turning point in Anita's life. The fear, confusion, and pressure surrounding her left her emotionally overwhelmed. When morning finally arrived, the quiet sunlight slowly entered the room through the tall windows. Anita sat silently at the edge of the bed, tears running down her face as she realized everything that had happened. James was still asleep, unaware of the storm of emotions surrounding the young woman beside him. Anita wiped her tears carefully, trying not to make a sound as she quietly stood up. She knew she could not stay any longer. Without waking him, she slowly left the room and walked out of the penthouse, stepping into the early morning with a heavy heart and an uncertain future. Morning sunlight slowly filled the quiet penthouse as James Theodore finally woke from his deep sleep. His head felt heavy from the alcohol the night before, and for a moment he lay still, trying to remember everything that had happened. The room was silent, and the space beside him on the bed was empty. Confused, he sat up slowly and looked around the room. Anita was gone. At first he assumed she had simply left early, something that sometimes happened in situations like this. But as he moved to get out of bed, something unusual caught his attention. His eyes stopped on the bedsheet, and his body suddenly froze. There was a clear red stain against the white fabric. For several seconds he stared at it in complete silence as the memories of the night slowly returned to him. He remembered Anita's nervous voice, the way she had hesitated, and the moment she had quietly pleaded with him to let her go. The realization hit him like a heavy weight. She had been telling the truth. She had been frightened because she had never experienced anything like that before. A deep sense of guilt spread through him instantly, and his chest tightened as he ran a hand through his hair. As he stood there trying to process what had happened, something small on the floor near the bed caught his attention. He bent down and picked it up. It was a delicate silver necklace with a small charm attached. The piece looked simple but meaningful, as if it had great personal value. James held it in his hand for a long moment, realizing that Anita must have accidentally left it behind. The image of her tearful face from the night before filled his mind again. For the first time in many years, James Theodore felt a deep regret settle inside his heart, knowing he had made a serious mistake. James Theodore stood quietly in the center of the room, the silver necklace resting in his palm. The guilt inside him refused to fade. For a long moment he stared at the delicate charm, imagining how important it must have been to Anita. It did not look expensive, yet it clearly carried meaning. His mind replayed the memories of the night again and again, her nervous voice, the hesitation in her eyes, and the way she had tried to explain something he had not fully understood. Now the truth was impossible to ignore. A heavy regret settled deep within him, something he had rarely felt in his controlled and disciplined life. Without wasting time, James dressed quickly and went downstairs where his assistant and driver were already waiting. His close friend and legal advisor, Daniel Hayes, arrived shortly after for their usual morning meeting. When Daniel noticed James's unusual seriousness, he immediately asked if something had happened. James hesitated at first, but eventually explained that he needed help finding someone. He described Anita carefully, mentioning the street where he had first seen her and the necklace she had left behind. Daniel, who had known James for years, was surprised by the urgency in his voice. It was rare to see the powerful CEO so personally affected by someone. Over the next few days, James quietly began searching for her. He visited the same nightlife district again and asked discreet questions, hoping someone might recognize her description. Some people remembered seeing a nervous young woman standing there that night, but no one knew where she had gone afterward. The more he searched, the more frustrated he became. Anita seemed to have disappeared completely from the city. Yet James refused to give up. Each night he kept the necklace safely in his hand for a moment before placing it in his desk drawer, reminding himself that somewhere out there was the girl he needed to find. Weeks slowly turned into months, yet Anita Charles seemed to have vanished from the city completely. James Theodore continued his quiet search, asking questions through trusted contacts and even hiring investigators to help find any trace of her. Every description he gave was careful and detailed: the nervous young woman with gentle eyes, the simple clothes she wore, and the silver necklace she had left behind. Despite his resources and influence, the search brought no real answers. It was as if Anita had simply disappeared into the vast crowd of the city. Meanwhile, James's daily life at Theodore Holdings continued as usual. The company expanded rapidly, new contracts were signed, and important meetings filled his schedule. Employees admired his sharp decisions and strong leadership, but Daniel Hayes noticed something different about his friend. James had become quieter and more thoughtful during moments when he used to be confident and focused. Sometimes he would pause during meetings, as if lost in his thoughts, before quickly returning to business. The silver necklace remained safely inside his office drawer, and he often found himself staring at it late in the evening after everyone else had gone home. Unknown to James, Anita had chosen a path far away from the places where he had searched. After leaving the penthouse that morning, she had walked through the quiet streets for hours, unsure where to go. The thought of returning to Vivian's apartment filled her with fear, so she never went back. Instead, she found temporary shelter in a small neighborhood on the far side of the city where cheap rooms were rented to people struggling to start over. Life there was difficult, but Anita preferred the uncertainty of independence over the cruelty she had left behind. Quietly and alone, she began trying to rebuild her life, unaware that the man searching for her still carried the weight of regret in his heart. Life in the small rented room Anita found was far from easy, but she forced herself to stay strong. The neighborhood was quiet and worn down, filled with people who worked long hours just to survive. Anita began taking small temporary jobs wherever she could, cleaning stores, helping in small cafes, and sometimes assisting elderly residents with simple chores. The work paid very little, but it was enough to buy food and keep the tiny room she now called home. Every evening she returned exhausted, yet she always held on to one small hope, that someday her life would become stable again. A few weeks later, Anita began feeling unusual changes in her body. At first she ignored them, believing the stress and long work hours were the cause. But as the days passed, the signs became impossible to dismiss. With a worried heart, she visited a small neighborhood clinic for a checkup. The doctor, a calm and professional woman named Dr. Elena Brooks, listened carefully before running a few tests. When the results came back, Dr. Brooks spoke gently, explaining that Anita was pregnant. The news left Anita completely silent for several seconds as the reality slowly settled into her mind. Walking out of the clinic that day, Anita felt a mixture of fear and determination. She sat quietly on a bench outside, staring at the busy street as people passed by without noticing her struggle. Raising a child alone felt overwhelming, but she knew she could not give up now. She placed her hand over her stomach, taking a deep breath as she promised herself she would protect the life growing inside her. No matter how difficult things became, she would find a way to survive. From that moment forward, Anita understood that every decision she made would no longer be only for herself. As the weeks passed, Anita's determination grew stronger. The small jobs she had been doing were no longer enough to support her growing needs. She knew that soon her pregnancy would become visible, and finding work would become even harder. Every morning she walked through different parts of the city, carefully reading job notices posted outside shops, offices, and restaurants. Some employers turned her away immediately, while others promised to call but never did. Despite the repeated disappointments, Anita refused to give up. She reminded herself that she was no longer fighting only for her own future. One afternoon, while walking past a large commercial district filled with tall office buildings, Anita noticed a job notice posted near the entrance of a modern glass tower. The sign was simple but clear: cleaning staff needed for the building. The company name written at the top was Theodore Holdings. Anita studied the notice carefully, thinking about the steady income it could provide. She had no idea that this company belonged to the very man she had left behind months earlier. To her, it was simply an opportunity she could not afford to ignore. With quiet determination, Anita stepped inside the building and approached the reception desk. The interior looked elegant and busy, with employees moving quickly through the halls. She filled out the application form with careful handwriting and explained that she was willing to work hard. The receptionist directed her to the Human Resources office, where a calm and professional woman named Clara Bennett reviewed her application. Clara noticed Anita's polite behavior and sincere attitude, qualities that immediately stood out. After a short conversation, Clara informed her that the company needed reliable workers and that she could start the job soon. Anita felt a wave of relief as she thanked her politely, unaware that the first day of her new job would bring an unexpected reunion. Anita arrived early on her first day at Theodore Holdings. The tall glass building looked even more impressive in the morning light, and employees were already moving quickly through the entrance with coffee cups and briefcases in their hands. Anita wore the simple uniform the company had given her and tried to stay calm despite the nervous excitement in her chest. This job meant stability, and stability meant she could take care of herself and the baby she was expecting. Clara Bennett welcomed her kindly and introduced her to the cleaning supervisor, who explained the tasks she would be responsible for each day. The morning passed as Anita quietly cleaned several offices on the lower floors. She worked carefully and with focus, making sure every desk and window was spotless. Most employees barely noticed her as they hurried between meetings, but Anita did not mind. She preferred the quiet rhythm of her work. After finishing the first set of rooms, the supervisor handed her a list of the next areas that needed cleaning. One of the final tasks on the list was the executive floor, a section of the building where only senior staff usually worked. Carrying her cleaning supplies, Anita stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The hallway upstairs was quiet and elegant, with large windows showing the city skyline. The supervisor had told her that the final office belonged to the company's CEO and needed to be cleaned before he arrived for the afternoon meeting. Anita took a deep breath and pushed the door open gently, preparing to do her work quickly. She had no idea that the man who owned this office was the very person whose memory she had tried so hard to leave behind. Anita pushed the office door open slowly and stepped inside the large executive office. The room was elegant and quiet, with tall windows that allowed sunlight to pour across the polished floor. A massive desk stood at the center, surrounded by neatly arranged files and modern furniture. Anita placed her cleaning supplies down and began working carefully, wiping the shelves and organizing the surface of the desk. Her movements were slow and focused, unaware that at that exact moment the elevator doors outside the office had just opened. James Theodore walked down the hallway reviewing a document in his hand while speaking briefly with Daniel Hayes. The two men were discussing an upcoming business meeting when James reached the door of his office. Without thinking much about it, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The moment he entered, his eyes lifted from the document and landed directly on Anita. Time seemed to stop instantly. The file in his hand lowered slowly as shock filled his expression. Across the room, Anita also froze when she recognized the man standing at the door. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Anita's heart raced. His memories of that night returned suddenly. She had never expected to see him again, especially not here. James's eyes moved from her face to the familiar figure standing in his office, and realization struck him immediately. This was the girl he had spent months trying to find. The same girl whose necklace still rested inside his desk drawer. A mixture of relief, surprise, and regret filled him all at once. Anita quickly lowered her eyes and stepped back, clearly uncomfortable, while James stood motionless, realizing that fate had just brought her back into his life in the most unexpected way. The silence inside the office felt heavy as both of them stood frozen for a moment. Anita quickly lowered her gaze and stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Her first instinct was to leave immediately before the tension grew worse. She picked up her cleaning supplies and quietly moved toward a door, hoping to escape before the conversation could begin. But before she could reach the hallway, James spoke her name softly. His voice carried urgency and regret. Anita stopped for a moment but did not turn around. James slowly walked closer, careful not to frighten her. Months of searching had led to this moment, and he knew he could not let her disappear again. His expression was serious, and his voice was calm as he asked her to stay for a few minutes. Anita hesitated before turning slightly to face him. The memory of that painful night still lingered in her mind, and she was unsure how to react. James explained that he had been looking for her for months, trying to apologize and understand what had happened. He opened the desk drawer beside him and gently placed the silver necklace on the table. Seeing the necklace again made Anita's eyes widen with surprise. She had believed it was lost forever. James explained that he had kept it safe, hoping someday he would return it to her personally. His voice was sincere as he admitted his mistake and explained that he had been under the influence of alcohol that night, something he deeply regretted. Anita listened quietly as he spoke. The honesty in his tone slowly softened the tension between them. For the first time since they met again, Anita finally looked directly at him, seeing not the powerful CEO, but a man who truly wanted to make things right. The office felt quieter after James finished speaking. Anita stood still, holding the silver necklace in her hand as emotions slowly settled inside her. For months she had tried to forget that night and move forward with her life, but standing here now made the memories return clearly. She looked at James carefully, studying his expression. The powerful businessman she had once feared now appeared sincere and deeply regretful. His apology did not sound forced or careless. Instead, it carried a calm honesty that slowly eased the tension in her heart. James gave her space, not wanting to pressure her into responding immediately. He understood that trust could not be rebuilt in a single moment. After a few seconds of silence, Anita finally spoke softly. She explained that the night had been confusing and frightening for her, but she had also spent months rebuilding her life and learning to move forward. James listened carefully without interrupting. When Anita finished, he thanked her for hearing him out and promised that he would respect whatever decision she made from that point onward. As they continued talking, the conversation gradually became calmer and more understanding. Anita realized that James had truly searched for her and had kept the necklace safe all this time. Meanwhile, James noticed the quiet strength she carried despite everything she had faced. The tension between them slowly turned into mutual respect. Although the past could not be changed, both of them began to see that their unexpected reunion might offer a chance for something new to grow. The conversation in the office lasted longer than either of them expected. What began with tension slowly turned into honesty. Anita explained how she had left Vivian's house and started a new life on her own. She told him about the small room she rented and the difficult jobs she had taken just to survive. James listened carefully, realizing how much strength she had shown during the months he had been searching for her. When Anita finally revealed that she was pregnant, the room fell silent again. The news surprised James deeply, but instead of reacting with confusion or distance, he remained calm and thoughtful. After a long pause, James spoke with quiet seriousness. He told Anita that he wanted to take responsibility and support her in every way possible. But more than responsibility, he admitted that meeting her again had changed something in him. During the months he spent searching for her, he had realized how deeply the night had affected him and how much he wanted the chance to make things right. Anita listened carefully, unsure at first how to respond. Yet she could see sincerity in his expression and the patience in his voice. This time, he was not the distant man from that painful night, but someone who genuinely wanted to build something better. Over the following months, their connection slowly grew stronger. James ensured Anita had proper medical care and a safe home, while Anita gradually learned to trust him again. Their lives, once completely different, began moving forward together. Eventually, surrounded by a small circle of friends and colleagues, James and Anita chose to marry and start a new chapter as a family. What had begun as a painful and unexpected encounter slowly transformed into a story of healing, responsibility, and hope for the future. And that brings us to the end of today's story. The world of luxury often hides stories deeper than what meets the eye. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories on luxury jewel stories. Until our next story, take care and stay tuned for more.